The Oakhaven Estates mansion felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum, grand and silent, its sprawling rooms echoing with an unspoken chill that had nothing to do with the relentless May rain streaking its towering glass windows. And Elara Vance? She was its most prized, most neglected exhibit. Heavily pregnant, the curve of her belly a stark contrast to the sharp angles of her anxiety, she stood before the colossal marble fireplace, tracing the hypnotic dance of the flames. But the fire offered no warmth against the ice settling in her heart. Weeks. It had been weeks since Julian Thorne, her billionaire husband, the man who had once promised her a universe of devotion, had last truly spoken to her. Not just spoken, but seen her. His presence when he was physically there was a mere shadow, his words clipped, his touch non-existent. Emotionally, physically, he was absent. Trapped. That's what she was. Trapped in this gilded cage, her days measured in the tick-tock of antique clocks and the hollow echo of her own footsteps on pristine marble floors. What had happened to them? Had their love, once so vibrant it had felt like the only real thing in her world, simply dissolved? Or was this crushing neglect a sign of something far more sinister, something lurking beneath the polished veneer of their fairy tale life? She shivered, though the room was overwarm. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Oh, how wildly different this was from the sun-drenched memories of Millfield, Ohio. Her upbringing there, with Marcus and Elara Vance, her hard-working, loving parents, had been humble, yes, but rich in ways Julian's world could never comprehend. Marcus, her father, a construction worker, always came home smelling of sawdust and honest sweat, his smile a beacon for their small family. Eleanor, her mother, an empathetic nurse at the local hospital, possessed a gentle touch and a listening ear that could soothe any trouble. Elara's childhood was a tapestry woven with modest joys, volunteering at the local animal shelter, the thrill of muddy knees from dancing on green lawns in summer, the crisp scent of apples picked at an orchard each fall. Simple. Real. Then Julian Thorne had entered her life, like a character striding from the pages of a glamorous, unbelievable novel. Tall, devastatingly charismatic, and fabulously wealthy, he was the heir to the Thorne Industries, an international conglomerate that dabbled in everything from real estate to technology to private equity. The tabloids swooned over his refined features and his highly publicized philanthropic work. But those who moved in his rarefied circles whispered of a different Julian, one with steely ambition, a relentless drive for success that bordered on ruthless. Did she see that then? Perhaps a flicker. But she was young, and he was intoxicating. Their first meeting was pure serendipity, or so it had seemed. A charity gala in New York City hosted by the prominent Ashworth family. Elara was there as a volunteer, never in her wildest dreams imagining she'd catch the eye of one of the country's wealthiest, most eligible bachelors. That night, Julian had mesmerized her. Not with his fortune, but with his stories of traveling the world, of investing in bold, up-and-coming entrepreneurs. He'd had this incredible wit, a thoughtful composure that drew her in. And he'd seemed genuinely curious about her life, her dreams, her simple world in Millfield. Or was that just part of the act? The question, a venomous little snake, now coiled in her mind. What followed was a whirlwind courtship, a dizzying blur of extravagant dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, impulsive weekend getaways to the Hamptons, culminating in a lavish storybook wedding at a historic cathedral in Manhattan. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, had been initially uneasy, their quiet pragmatism clashing with the sheer scale of Julian's world. But even they had eventually been won over, trusting in his apparent devotion to their daughter, a devotion that now felt like a cruel mirage. Months had turned into years. The public caught glimpses of them at high-profile events, the perfect couple, all smiles and whispered affections. But behind the mansion's imposing doors, the fairy tale was crumbling. Elara often felt an acute, suffocating isolation. From a nurse's daughter in Millfield, she had become the wife of a mogul who often didn't return home until after midnight, if at all. His affections, once a torrent, dwindled to a trickle, then became sporadic, and finally, achingly distant. The staff, including the ever-discreet housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, tiptoed around her, their faces carefully neutral, yet their eyes held a pity Elara found unbearable. The gilded artwork, the plush, priceless rugs, the endless, echoing corridors, they all felt cold, empty. When Elara discovered she was pregnant, a fragile hope had flickered within her. Perhaps this, their child, would rekindle the warmth. Perhaps it would break the monotony of wealth and ambition, spark a sense of family closeness that Julian, with his own stern, demanding upbringing under a formidable matriarch, had clearly missed. But instead of joy, Julian had grown stranger, more silent. He'd refused to attend the first ultrasound, citing an urgent, can't-be-missed conference in Singapore. Weeks passed with minimal conversation, each day a fresh layer of ice forming around Elara's heart. She found herself sobbing in the oppressive hush of her palatial bedroom, cradling the tiny, precious bump that was their baby, their forgotten baby. Now, standing before the fireplace, the storm outside a perfect mirror to the tempest in her soul, she clutched her belly. Julian had been away for nearly 2 weeks this time. No calls, no messages, not even the basic decency of letting her know when or if he'd be back. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of questions. Had he stopped loving her entirely? Was he hiding something more than just business obligations? Something darker? One thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. She was on the brink of discovering a labyrinth of secrets. Secrets that threatened to shatter the very foundation of her life. Her fingers strayed to the cool metal of an antique silver locket at her throat, a seemingly insignificant gift from Julian in their early days. She rarely wore it. But lately, she'd found herself touching it, a strange compulsion. Etched into its surface was an odd recurring symbol, a serpent coiled, devouring its own tail. She didn't know its meaning, had never asked, but looking at it now, a prickle of unease, a sense of ominous foreboding, washed over her. It felt like a warning. The flames in the hearth leaped and danced, casting flickering, distorted shadows on the ivory walls. Elara watched them, her reflection a pale, haunted face in the polished brass of the fender. And in that moment, a new resolve, hard and unyielding as the marble beneath her feet, solidified within her. She would not remain a prisoner, a beautifully kept doll in this gilded cage. She would not let her child be born into a world of lies and unspoken betrayals. She would find answers, no matter the cost. Her hand tightened on the locket, the serpent's image pressing into her palm. As she whispered to the dancing flames, "I have to know." Her husband Julian finally returned, not with a bang, but with the stealthy quiet of a cat burglar, late one rain-lashed night. Elara, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, watched from the upstairs window as the sleek black sedan, a phantom in the stormy darkness, glided up the circular driveway. Headlights slashed across the manicured lawns, making the sculpted cherubs in the fountain look momentarily demonic. At least he was home. Was that relief or dread coiling in her stomach? Hard to tell anymore. Down in the cavernous foyer, a space designed more for impressing visitors than for welcoming home a husband, she found him, Julian. Handing his expensive trench coat to the ever-present Mrs. Albright, he looked different. Tired, yes, lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, but there was something else. An unfamiliar tension in the set of his jaw, a subtle furrow in his brow that hadn't been there before. Or maybe she was just noticing it now, her senses hyper-alert to every nuance. "You're back," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the sheer volume of the hall. Did he even hear her? He barely met her eyes. A fleeting glance, that was all. "Long flights," he clipped, his voice devoid of warmth, a stranger's voice. Back-to-back meetings. Brutal. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, a gesture that usually made her heart flutter. Now, nothing. "I need a shower and some rest." And that was it. No kiss, no embrace, not even a query about her, about their baby. They stood there, an invisible, icy chasm stretching between them. Elara ached to ask, to scream, "What's wrong with you? With US? Why haven't you called? Don't you care?" But the words died in her throat, choked by a potent mix of fear and a weary resignation. What was the point? She simply nodded, a small jerky movement, and stood aside as he ascended the grand, sweeping staircase, his footsteps echoing with a chilling finality. Night stretched on, an eternity of darkness and the relentless drumming of rain. Elara lay awake in their vast, empty bed, the space beside her cold, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. Julian never joined her. Why did she even expect him to? Hope, she was learning, was a particularly cruel form of self-torture. By morning, a sliver of watery sunlight struggled through the oppressive gray. She found him in the downstairs study, the heavy oak door half shut, a sanctum she rarely dared to enter uninvited these days. His voice, strained and low, drifted out. He was on the phone. Again. "Look, I'm telling you, Mr. Davies, this is not the time," Julian was saying, his tone tight with a controlled anger that Elara recognized all too well. "I need space. Can't you bloody well see that? I'll figure it out. Just leave me be for a while, all right?" A click, then silence. "Mr. Davies?" Who was Mr. Davies? The name meant nothing to her. Another secret? Another layer to this bewildering new Julian? A knot formed in her stomach, tight and painful. She thought about confronting him right then, barging in, demanding answers, an explanation for this Mr. Davies, for everything. But she hesitated. The baby. She had to think of the baby. Stress wasn't good. So, with resentment and a deep, unsettling concern churning within her, she walked away, the hush of the corridor magnifying every uncertain, fearful thought. The next few days were a masterclass in Julian's evasiveness. He drifted in and out of the O'Haven mansion like a ghost, a handsome, impeccably dressed specter haunting the periphery of her life. More secretive calls, hasty departures, sometimes in the dead of night, his sleek black sedan whispering away into the darkness. Whenever she tried to talk, to breach the wall he'd built around himself, he'd deflect with short, rehearsed lines. "Business never stops, Elara. You know that." Or, "I'm sorry, darling, but I have urgent matters in Denver." Denver now? Last week it was Singapore. Or sometimes just a dismissive, "Not now, Elara." The staff, usually so adept at pretending nothing was amiss in the Thorne household, couldn't entirely hide their worried glances. Mrs. Albright, the housekeeper, sometimes found Elara crying quietly in the vast, silent library, offering a cup of tea with a sympathy that was both kind and excruciating. Martha, the elderly cook, a woman who'd been with the Thorne family for decades, started preparing light, soothing soups and calming herbal teas, her gentle attempts to ease Elara's palpable tension. But no one dared question Julian directly. His reputation for being unyielding, for a temper that could be glacial and cutting, was legendary. They all knew their place. And Elara was beginning to understand hers. One morning, as another dreary rain pelted against the windows, something in Elara snapped. She was done. Done with the excuses, the evasiveness, the soul-crushing loneliness. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, she confronted Julian in the foyer. He was, predictably, on his way out, a small, expensive-looking suitcase at his feet. He actually looked surprised to see her standing there, barring his path, as if she were the ghost. "Julian," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "What's going on? Seriously, I'm carrying your child. Your child. Don't I deserve to know why you've been avoiding me? Why you're sneaking around, leaving at all hours of the night?" He kept his gaze fixed on his luggage, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I have crucial negotiations in Denver," he said, his voice mechanical, rehearsed. "I told you, business is complicated right now." Complicated? Elara's voice trembled. Not with fear this time, but with a pent-up frustration that was close to boiling over. "You were supposedly gone for 2 weeks already. You ignore my texts, my calls. Do you have any idea how that feels? To be treated like I don't even exist?" He finally looked up at her. His eyes, those eyes she had once found so captivating, were unreadable. Or, no. For a fleeting second she saw something. Guilt? Sorrow, maybe? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar, shuttered expression. "You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under," he said, his voice flat. He reached for the handle of his suitcase. "We'll talk when I'm back." And just like that, he was gone. The heavy mahogany door closed behind him with a soft, definitive thud like the final note of a dirge. She watched him leave, a surge of anger, so potent it was almost dizzying, coursing through her. No. She refused to be a bystander in her own life, in her own marriage. If Julian Thorne wanted to lock himself away in a fortress of secrets, fine. She would find a way to tear those walls down, or she would walk away altogether. Determined, her mind racing, Elara knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust, someone outside the glittering, treacherous orbit of the Thorne Empire. And there was only one person, Chloe Maxwell. Her best friend from college. Chloe, now a razor-sharp investigative journalist for the City Chronicle in Manhattan. Their lives had diverged dramatically. Elara into the stratosphere of the super-rich, Chloe into the gritty world of deadlines and uncovering uncomfortable truths. but their bond had remained. Thank God for that. A few phone calls later, filled with Elara's tearful, fragmented explanations, Chloe agreed to come to Oakhaven immediately. "Hang tight, Elara," Chloe had said, her voice a lifeline in the swirling chaos of Elara's emotions. "I'm on my way." But before Chloe could arrive, something else did. Something that sent a fresh jolt of icy fear through Elara. Slipped under her bedroom door, sometime during the night, was a single sheet of thick, expensive-looking cream-colored paper. Typed on it, in an impersonal sans-serif font, were just a few chilling words. "He is not who you think. The serpent devours its own tail. Be careful." An anonymous note. A threat? A warning? The paper felt cold in her trembling hand. And that phrase, "the serpent devours its own tail." Why did that sound so horribly, terrifyingly familiar? Her gaze fell upon the antique silver locket at her throat. The serpent symbol. It was the same. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a failing marriage anymore, was it? This was something else, something dangerous. Chloe Maxwell, her expression a mixture of concern and steely resolve, arrived at the Oakhaven mansion a few hours later, her battered, reliable car looking distinctly out of place amongst the polished luxury vehicles gleaming in the Thorne driveway. Elara practically fell into her friend's embrace at the door. "Oh, Chloe, it's bad," she managed to choke out, the carefully constructed dam of her composure finally breaking. "It's really, really bad." Leading Chloe to a small, private sitting room, far from the prying eyes and ears of the staff, Elara poured out the whole miserable story, the months of Julian's disappearing acts, the sudden, secretive phone calls, the rumored deals, the way his affection had withered and died almost overnight. And then, her voice dropping to a fearful whisper, she showed Chloe the anonymous note. I think I'm in danger, Chloe. Waira có một vài tiện ích cần phải bật chế độ hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini thì mới chạy được. Bạn có thể bật chế độ này tại hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini. Chloe Maxwell, bless her pragmatic and resourceful soul, listened. She didn't just hear the words, she listened to Elara's fractured, tear-soaked story, her journalist's mind already sifting through the raw emotion for the hard facts. The locket, the anonymous note with its cryptic, serpent devours its own tail message. Chloe took it all in, her expression growing increasingly grim. "Okay," she said, her voice calm but firm when Elara finally fell silent, exhausted. "Okay, Elara, this is a lot. Understatement of the century, but we're gonna figure it out." Chloe, ever the professional, immediately suspected the obvious and the not-so-obvious. "An affair is possible, likely even, given what you've described about Julian's distance," she mused, tapping a pen against her notepad. "But this note, this serpent business, that feels like something more, something shadier. And who wouldn't think so? Billionaires and their secrets, right? It's practically a cliché, except when it's happening to you." Without missing a beat, Chloe was on her phone. "I have a guy," she said, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Jax Riley. He's unconventional, let's say, but he's the best private investigator in Manhattan when it comes to digging up secrets people really don't want found. He owes me a favor. Or 3. Jax Riley. The name had a certain gritty ring to it, a world away from the polished, rarefied air of Oakhaven Estates and Thorne Industries. Could this Jax really penetrate Julian's fortress of lies? Apparently, he could. And damn, was he fast. Within a week, a single agonizing week where Elara jumped at every shadow and replayed every cold word from Julian, Chloe was back. And the news she brought was devastating. It was a betrayal served up in high definition, a gut punch that left Elara breathless. How much can one person take before they shatter? Chloe laid it all out on the antique mahogany coffee table in Elara's sitting room, the damning evidence a stark contrast to the room's opulent, old-world charm. Bank statements, columns of figures that screamed financial misconduct, massive, unexplained withdrawals from accounts Elara hadn't even known existed, wire transfers, dizzying in their complexity, to a labyrinth of shell companies with deliberately nondescript names. And then there was the offshore account. Belize, of all places, a discreet little nest egg, far from prying eyes. Julian's or Thorne Industries? At this point, did it even matter? "This is a lot of money, Elara," Chloe said softly, her voice laced with a concern that went beyond journalistic curiosity. Money being moved around in ways that are, shall we say, highly irregular. But the financial irregularities, as shocking as they were, paled in comparison to what came next. The most painful blow. The one that ripped through Elara's already tattered heart like a shard of glass. Jax Riley, true to his reputation, hadn't just found financial dirt. He'd found her. Serafina Dubois. The name itself sounded like something out of a torrid romance novel. A chic, ambitious interior designer, apparently a rising star in high society, often seen at the very same galas and events Elara had once attended on Julian's arm. And now, Serafina was on Julian's arm in a very different, very intimate way. Jax had delivered. Photographic evidence, crystal clear, eyewitness accounts, no room for doubt, no escape. The photos? Oh God, the photos. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. There was Julian, her husband, the father of her unborn child, stepping out of a luxurious, ultramodern penthouse in downtown Manhattan, a property, Chloe grimly informed her, that had recently been acquired by a newly formed subsidiary of Thorne Industries. And there, clinging to his arm, laughing up at him with an expression of pure adoration, was Serafina Dubois. Sleek, confident. Everything Elara currently felt she was not. They exchanged brief, intimate smiles, a casual shared intimacy that spoke volumes. The timestamps on the photos were a final, brutal twist of the knife. They corresponded to nights Julian had claimed to be away on those urgent business trips. The Singapore conference, the Denver negotiations, all lies, every single one. The room tilted. Elara gripped the edge of the table, the glossy photographs blurring before her eyes. The visual proof of his infidelity, his calculated deception, was a visceral, physical blow. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore, a gnawing fear in the dead of night. It was real. It was here, in these sickeningly clear images. Julian, Serafina, together, smiling, while she, his pregnant wife, sat alone in their cold, empty mansion, her heart heartbreaking. Chloe's voice, gentle but insistent, broke through the fog of pain. Elara, breathe. She placed a comforting hand on Elara's shoulder. I'm so sorry, honey, truly. But Elara barely heard her. She just stared at the images, at Julian's handsome, smiling face, a face she now realized she didn't know at all. The pain was raw, overwhelming, a tidal wave of grief and rage, and a despair so profound it threatened to swallow her whole. How could he? After everything? The vows, the promises, the life they were supposed to be building together. All of it a lie? Chloe offered comfort, a shoulder to cry on, a steady presence in the storm. But she also, gently but firmly, pushed Elara to think, to consider her next steps. What are you going to do, Elara? She asked, her voice low. You can't just let this go. And amidst the wreckage of her heart, something shifted. A tiny, fierce spark ignited in the ashes of her shattered dreams. Her unborn child. Her baby. She pressed a hand to her belly, a sudden, overwhelming surge of protective instinct flooding through her. He wouldn't destroy her. He wouldn't destroy their child's future with his lies and betrayals. She wouldn't let him. This pain, this all-consuming heartbreak, she would use it. She would forge it into armor. Elara looked up at Chloe, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes, for the first time in weeks, held a flicker of something other than despair. A spark of defiance. A glimmer of the fight she didn't know she had left in her. He won't destroy me, she whispered, her voice hoarse but resolute. He won't. She took a shaky breath, then another, drawing strength from some hidden wellspring within. I need a lawyer, Chloe. Her voice grew stronger, steel lacing through the sorrow. The best one, the absolute best divorce attorney in Manhattan. The steel in Elara's voice when she demanded the best divorce attorney in Manhattan wasn't just for show. It was the first clang of a hammer against the bars of her gilded cage. And Ananya Sharma? She was the kind of lawyer who didn't just rattle cages. She dismantled them, piece by painstaking piece. Her office predictably exuded that particular brand of Manhattan power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's-eye view of the city's relentless ambition, plush, understated furniture that probably cost more than Elara's childhood home. But Ananya herself, with her sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unshakable calm, was a comforting presence amidst the jarring turbulence of Elara's emotions. Elara laid it all out. The creeping neglect that had become a suffocating blanket, Julian's inexplicable coldness, the devastating discovery of the affair with Serafina Dubois, the whispers of financial secrecy, the anonymous, threatening note, and the unsettling serpent locket. Ananya listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally making a precise note on a crisp legal pad. No judgment, just focused intensity. You ever feel like you're pouring out your soul and the other person is just cataloging it? Yeah, that. But in a good way. A professional way. When Elara finally finished, her voice raw, Ananya nodded slowly. I see, she said, her voice measured, calm. It's not uncommon, Mrs. Thorne. Elara flinched internally at the name, a name she was already desperate to shed. In marriages where there's a significant wealth disparity, for one spouse to become isolated. The secrecy around finances, as you've described, coupled with these withdrawals and offshore accounts, strongly suggests he may be attempting to funnel assets to protect them. Perhaps from you, should you pursue legal action. Elara swallowed hard, the expensive fabric of Ananya's guest chair suddenly feeling scratchy and uncomfortable. I'm worried, Miss Sharma. Worried about my future, of course, but more than anything, the future of my child. Her voice broke on the last word, a wave of vulnerability washing over her. Julian, Anthony Thorne, he has all the power here. The Thorne dynasty is an empire. Ananya leaned forward, her hands clasped on the polished expanse of her desk. Legally, Elara? May I call you Elara? That's not necessarily true. As his wife, you have significant claims to marital assets. The key, and here her voice sharpened with a new intensity, is documentation. Every hidden account, every secret property, every unexplained transaction. If it transpires he's diverting funds to cheat you out of your fair share, we can use legal channels to expose that, and we will. She paused, her gaze unwavering. However, you need to be prepared for a bitter fight. Men like Julian Thorne, men backed by powerful, image-conscious families like the Thorne dynasty, they seldom give in easily. This will not be a quiet, amicable parting of ways. Are you prepared for that? Terrified. Oh, absolutely. Every instinct screamed at Elara to run, to hide, to somehow make all of this just go away. But then she felt the faint flutter of life within her, a tiny, insistent reminder of what she was fighting for. And in Ananya Sharma's calm, confident words, she found a flicker of empowerment, a sliver of hope. I'll do whatever it takes, Elara said, her voice surprisingly steady. Tears threatened again, blurring the impressive skyline outside Ananya's window. I just wanted a family, Miss Sharma. I didn't want a war. Ananya offered a small, sympathetic smile. I know, divorce is never easy, Elara, especially under these circumstances. My team and I will help you navigate this. We'll be your shield and your sword, but you must brace yourself. Julian, and more pointedly his family, may retaliate. They have vast resources, and as you said, they are extremely well connected. Elara left the law firm an hour later, feeling both fortified and hollow, clutching a thick folder of documents. Legal jargon, financial disclosures, affidavits, her new, unwelcome reality. The drive back to Oakhaven Estates was a blur. Her mind swirled with memories, not of the happy times, those felt too painful to touch, but of her wedding day. Julian, so handsome, so charming, slipping that enormous diamond ring on her finger, his voice husky as he promised love, devotion, forever. Now that ring, still on her finger, felt like a shackle, each carat a weight tightening around her heart, constricting her breath. Broken promises. So many broken promises. Later that evening, the mansion was its usual mausoleum self, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Julian, of course, was out. Elara found herself in the library, the folder from Ananya open before her, the legal documents a confusing, terrifying landscape. Her hands trembled as she tried to make sense of it all. She heard his footsteps in the hallway then, the distinctive click of his expensive Italian shoes on the marble. Panic flared. Quickly, she tucked the damning papers under a large, ornate coffee table book on Renaissance art, a wedding gift, ironically. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird as he entered the room. What are you doing in here in the dark, Elara? Julian asked, his voice cool, distant. He flipped on a nearby lamp, the sudden light making her blink. She forced a calm she didn't feel. Reading, she managed, her voice a little too high. Couldn't sleep. Lame, so lame. He looked as if he was about to say something, perhaps another clipped remark about her overactive imagination or hormonal sensitivities, his recent go-to explanations for her distress. But he changed his mind, his expression unreadable. An uneasy silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating, broken only by the rustle of the heavy silk curtains and the draft from the ill-fitting French doors. Another thing he'd promised to get fixed. never happened. Enough. She had to do this. Now. Elara gathered her courage, the lawyer's warnings about a bitter fight echoing in her ears. Julian, she began, her voice surprisingly steady, I want to talk about us. He stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unblinking. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, or perhaps just his own boredom, he sank into a plush leather armchair opposite her, loosening his silk tie. Fine, he said, sounding utterly weary, let's talk. She swallowed, her gaze unwavering, meeting his. I'm worried, Julian, about our marriage, about this baby. She gestured to her swollen abdomen. You're never around, and when you are, you barely look at me, you don't touch me. What happened to us, Julian? He ran a hand through his perfectly tousled hair, another heavy sigh. I told you, Elara, he said, his voice tinged with impatience. Work is complicated. The economy is shifting. Investors are restless. I have obligations, to my board, to my family's legacy. The Thorne dynasty, always the damn dynasty. Her temper, simmering for weeks, finally flared. The carefully constructed dam of her composure cracked. Obligations? She repeated, her voice shaking now, not with fear, but with a white-hot anger. You mean your obligation to Serafina de Bois? Is she part of the family legacy too? Julian's eyes went wide. Shock. Genuine shock. For a split second, he looked like a startled boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He seemed, for once, at a loss. I know about the penthouse, Julian, Elara pressed, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a righteous fury. The damning photos from Jax Riley were seared into her memory. I know you've been there with her. On nights you told me you were in Singapore, in Denver. He shot to his feet, the mask of weary indifference replaced by a blaze of anger. You've been spying on me? He accused, his voice dangerously low. Elara glared at him, tears stinging her eyes, but she wouldn't back down, not anymore. I wouldn't have had to spy if you'd been honest with me, Julian. You stood at that altar and promised me a future, our future. But you've been investing your time, your affection, your body in someone else. She stopped, her shoulders heaving, her chest tight with a potent cocktail of panic and pain. Julian looked momentarily stricken, a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? It was there, she saw it. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that chillingly familiar hardness. He turned away, his fists clenched at his sides. It's not what you think, Elara, he muttered, his back to her. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound that echoed in the cavernous library. Really, Julian? It's not what I think? You expect me to believe that? After weeks, months of your lies, your neglect, your utter contempt for me, for our child, you're telling me I've got this wrong? He whirled around, his eyes flashing with a cold fury. That penthouse is business-related. Serafina is just an associate, a designer I hired. Don't insult my intelligence, Julian, Elara cut in, her voice trembling with both heartbreak and an almost exhilarating rage. This was it. The point of no return. Do you think I'm too naive, too stupid to see the truth when it's staring me in the face? I have my own sources, Julian. Sources that don't lie. You've betrayed me, and you've betrayed our child. For a breathtaking moment, it looked like he might break. A swirl of conflicted emotions played across his handsome features. Anger, denial, and yes, she saw it again, that fleeting shadow of regret. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, the mask of the ruthless Thorne heir slammed back into place. Fine, he said, his voice as cold and hard as the marble surrounding them. If that's what you need to believe, Elara, then so be it. His cold dismissal was a fresh stab to her already wounded heart. This cold, calculating man was not the Julian she'd married. Or perhaps he was, and she'd just been too blind, too in love to see it. What a fool she'd been. The news of the impending Thorne divorce, and the whispers of scandal that inevitably accompanied it, spread through the gilded corridors of high society like wildfire. And inevitably, it reached the ears of the one person Julian Thorne truly seemed to fear. His mother. Victoria Thorne. The undisputed, iron-willed matriarch of the Thorne dynasty. From her imposing, windswept estate on the exclusive enclave of Seacrest Island, Victoria reigned over the vast Thorne conglomerate with a ruthlessness that was legendary. She despised anything or anyone that threatened the family's pristine, carefully cultivated public image. And a messy, public divorce involving her eldest son and heir? That was more than a threat. It was an abomination. The summons came via a terse, official-sounding email from Victoria's personal assistant. An urgent family meeting was to be convened on Seacrest Island. Julian and Elara were, of course, expected to attend. Expected, not invited. Commanded. Elara's stomach churned with a potent mix of dread and a strange, defiant curiosity. The last thing she wanted was to face Victoria Thorne's withering stare, to be subjected to her infamous interrogations. But this was also an opportunity. Wasn't it? An opportunity to confront the source of Julian's fear, the puppet master pulling his strings. Maybe, just maybe, she could appeal to the woman, mother to mother, or at the very least, make it clear that she wouldn't be silenced or swept aside. The helicopter ride to Seacrest Island was an exercise in exquisite tension. Elara sat opposite a cold, silent Julian, the roar of the rotor blades, a deafening counterpoint to the unspoken accusations hanging heavy in the air between them. She stared out at the churning gray Atlantic below, her hand instinctively resting on her belly, a silent promise to the life within her. "I will protect you. I will." Victoria Thorne herself greeted them at the imposing oak door of her gray stone manor, a fortress perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the turbulent ocean. She was exactly as Elara remembered from their few, stilted previous encounters. Impeccably dressed in a severely tailored pantsuit, her silver hair coiffed in a sleek, unforgiving chignon, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Her eyes, the color of ice chips, raked over Elara, lingering for a moment on her pregnant belly before dismissing her entirely and turning to Julian. "This is a family matter, Julian," Victoria said, her voice as crisp and cold as the Seacrest Island wind. "Let's get inside, we have much to discuss." Elara's gaze darted to Julian, searching for some sign of support, of solidarity. He avoided her eyes, his expression unreadable. Swallowing hard against the knot of fear tightening in her throat, she followed them into a grand, intimidating sitting room. More dark oak paneling, more ancestral portraits glaring down from the walls, each subject exuding the same air of stern, unyielding authority. And waiting for them, arranged like vultures around a polished mahogany table, was a phalanx of Thorne family lawyers, led by the particularly stern and hawk-nosed Silas Blackwood and a smattering of other Thorne relatives, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. A trial by dynasty. Wonderful. Victoria Thorne, true to form, wasted no time on pleasantries. She addressed Elara directly, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was far more chilling than outright anger. "I understand there have been disagreements in your household, my dear," she began, her icy gaze flicking over Elara. "But the Thorne name, Elara, does not bow to scandal. We must handle this unfortunate situation, quietly." Elara's blood simmered. The sheer arrogance, the casual dismissal of her pain, her betrayal. "I appreciate your concern, Victoria," she said, striving for a composure she was far from feeling. "But Julian's behavior, his absence, his neglect, his infidelity, has made it impossible for us to continue as if everything is fine. Because it's not fine, it's broken." Victoria's eyes flashed, a spark of the infamous Thorne temper. "Julian is a busy man, Elara. As the eldest son and heir to the Thorne conglomerate, he carries responsibilities you clearly cannot or will not imagine." Julian stood to the side, silent as a stone, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the rain-lashed windows. Useless. Utterly useless. Elara clenched her hands in her lap, resisting the urge to scream. "I don't doubt the weight of his responsibilities, Victoria," she said, her voice tight. "But being busy doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't excuse emotional abandonment. We are having a child, Victoria. His child. And he hasn't even bothered to be present, to show an ounce of interest or concern." One of the family lawyers, the aforementioned Silas Blackwood, cleared his throat, his voice dry as dust. "Mrs. Thorne, Elara, if I may," he interjected smoothly. "We have, of course, prepared certain settlement arrangements, generous arrangements, I assure you, designed to ensure your comfort and naturally the child's, without the unfortunate necessity of public legal proceedings. As you can imagine, a very public divorce would be detrimental, not only to Julian's reputation but also to the family's extensive business interests. The Thorne dynasty values its privacy." Elara's jaw clenched. So, that was it. Hush money. A discreet payoff to make the inconvenient pregnant wife simply disappear. So, you want me to quietly accept your generous arrangement, sign a gag order, and remain married in name only, a silent, complicit figurehead? She demanded, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. Is that the Thorne solution to everything? Money? She could almost feel the tension radiating from Julian, a silent, palpable wave of discomfort, but still, he said nothing. He just stood there, a handsome, useless statue. Victoria's expression remained a mask of icy calm, though Elara could see a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly in her cheek. We are not suggesting anything so crude, Elara, Victoria replied, her voice dropping to a dangerously soft, almost silken tone. We are merely proposing that these unfortunate matters be handled discreetly. We are, of course, willing to grant you certain concessions. Concessions? Elara stared at them, at the circle of cold, calculating faces, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. A child was not a concession. A marriage, even a broken one, was not a bargaining chip. I have every right to a divorce, Victoria, she said, her voice rising despite her efforts to control it. A divorce based on truth, not on your family's desire to sweep its scandals under the rug. This conversation, Victoria Thorne interrupted, her voice suddenly like a whip crack, sharp and final, is over. Her eyes, chips of glacial ice, bored into Elara. Julian, take her to the East Wing. We will reconvene in the morning. Perhaps by then, calmer heads, your head, Elara, will prevail. It was not a request. It was a command, an imperial decree. Elara looked at Julian, one last desperate appeal in her eyes. Say something. Stand up for me. For us. For your child. He met her gaze for a fleeting second, and in that instant she saw not a husband, not a partner, but a trapped, frightened boy. Then he just nodded. A single, almost imperceptible nod of acquiescence to his mother. And with that tiny movement, the last vestiges of Elara's hope for him, for them, crumbled into dust. The rest of the Thorne kin, the silent, judgmental chorus, parted like the Red Sea as Elara, her head held high despite the tremor in her legs, followed Julian down a long, echoing corridor. The portraits of stern-faced Thorne ancestors seemed to judge her every step, their painted eyes following her with cold, aristocratic disdain. The East Wing, indeed. It felt more like the gallows. Ngoài ra, có một vài tiện ích cần phải bật chế độ hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini thì mới chạy được. Bạn có thể bật chế độ này tại hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini. The so-called guest wing of Victoria Thorne's Seacrest Island fortress was no less opulent than the rest of the sprawling manor. Lush carpets that swallowed sound, priceless antiques shipped from forgotten corners of Europe, and vast windows offering sweeping, melancholic views of the churning gray Atlantic. But for Elara, it felt less like a luxury suite and more like a beautifully appointed prison cell. She collapsed into a crimson velvet armchair. Her emotions a raging, chaotic storm within her, the earlier confrontation with Victoria echoing in her mind. Julian, her husband, her supposed protector, stood across the room, stiff and silent as one of the ancestral portraits in the hallway, his gaze fixed on the darkening, angry sky outside. How could he just stand by? Finally, the silence, thick and cloying, became unbearable. Why, Julian? Elara's voice was a raw whisper, cracking with unshed tears and simmering fury. Why did you drag me here? To this island prison? So your mother can strong-arm me into pretending everything's fine? So she can bully me into silence while you carry on with her? The name Serafina Dubois was a bitter acid on her tongue. Julian walked to the window, his shoulders slumped, looking older, warier than she'd ever seen him. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, she saw not the powerful Thorne heir, but a lost, defeated boy. You shouldn't have come, Elara, he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the rising howl of the wind outside. I tried to warn you, I tried to handle this. Elara let out a bitter, incredulous laugh. Warn me? Warn me about what, Julian? That your family is so obsessed with its pristine image that they'll stoop to anything to keep your transgressions, your betrayals hidden? That your mother intends to protect her precious Thorne conglomerate, no matter the human cost? He turned sharply then, his eyes, those dark, unreadable Thorne eyes, burning with a sudden, desperate intensity. Don't you see, Elara? I'm caught between you and them. My mother, she controls the board. She controls entire segments of our company. She's not a woman to be trifled with, Elara. You have no idea. Oh, I think I'm beginning to get a very clear idea of what Victoria Thorne is capable of, Elara retorted, rising from the armchair, crossing her arms over her chest, a fragile shield against his sudden vehemence. "And what about your affair with Serafina, Julian? Or is that part of the grand family plan too? A pre-approved distraction?" His expression darkened, the brief flicker of vulnerability extinguished. "I'm not discussing Serafina with you," he said, his voice flat, cold. That's over." Stunned, Elara reeled back as if he'd struck her. "Over," she echoed, her voice trembling. "It's over? Then you admit it? You admit there was something? All those nights, all those lies?" He swallowed, his gaze flitting around the opulent room as if searching for an escape. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Elara thought she saw a flicker of genuine regret in his eyes, a shadow of the man she had once loved. But it vanished, quick as a phantom. "It happened, all right?" he conceded, his voice low, strained. "But it was a distraction, a mistake, one I'm not proud of." Hurt and rage, a potent, searing cocktail, whipped through her. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "A distraction?" she whispered, her voice dangerously soft. "A distraction from your pregnant wife, Julian? From the child you supposedly wanted?" His shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under, Elara," he said, his voice heavy with a weariness that seemed to age him before her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. Never. But my life, it has always been orchestrated by the family. By her. Our marriage, I thought it was the one thing I had for myself, the one thing that was real. But even that became tangled in family obligations, in expectations, in the Thorne conglomerate." Tears pricked at the edge of Elara's eyes, hot and stinging. "So you ignored me for weeks?" she choked out. "You let me sit in that empty mausoleum of a house, pregnant and alone, worrying myself sick about whether you even cared, whether our marriage meant anything to you at all? Do you have any idea how isolating that felt, Julian? How terrifying?" He squeezed his eyes shut, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words so faint they were almost carried away by the wind rattling the window panes. "Elara, I am so sorry." A surge of conflicting emotions welled up inside her. Love, what was left of it, warring with a profound sense of betrayal, a surprising flicker of pity, and a deep, simmering anger. She took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. "I hired a divorce attorney, Julian," she said, the words falling like stones into the oppressive silence of the room. His eyes flew open, wide with a mixture of shock and, "Was that fear? You did?" She nodded, the unshed tears finally escaping, tracing hot paths down her cold cheeks. "Yes, Julian, I did. Because I won't live like this. I won't be your silent, suffering wife, a pretty ornament for the Thorne dynasty. And I damn well won't raise my child in this cold, superficial, heartless world you all inhabit." He said nothing for a long moment, then sank onto a nearby chaise lounge, his head in his hands. The weight of his secrets, his mother's relentless demands, the impending implosion of his marriage, it all seemed to crush him. Elara watched him, a strange ache in her chest. She remembered the charming, attentive man she had first fallen in love with, the man who had seemed so full of life, so genuinely interested in her. Where had that man gone? Had he ever truly existed? Or was he just another carefully constructed illusion, another product of the Thorne conglomerate? Just as the tension in the room reached an almost unbearable peak, the door swung open suddenly without a knock. It was one of Victoria's uniformed staff, a young woman named Clara, her face carefully blank, her eyes averted. "Mrs. Thorne," Clara announced, her voice devoid of inflection. "Mrs. Victoria Thorne demands your immediate audience, in her office." Demands, not requests, never requests. Elara steeled herself, her chin lifting almost imperceptibly. She exchanged a quick, unreadable glance with Julian. He nodded numbly, still looking utterly defeated. Without another word, they followed Clara out of the gilded cage of the East Wing and into the labyrinthine corridors of the manor, bracing themselves for whatever fresh hell, whatever new judgment Victoria Thorne had in store for them. The price of freedom, Elara was beginning to realize, was going to be terrifyingly high, and the fight, it seemed, had only just begun. But as she walked, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Victoria Thorne thought she could break her? The iron-willed matriarch had no idea who she was dealing with. Elara Vance might have been naive once, but the woman walking towards that confrontation was a mother protecting her child. and that made her more dangerous than any Thorne. This island might be Victoria's fortress, but Elara was about to lay siege. The sanctuary of the discreet boutique hotel, a haven Chloe had secured through a called-in favor, felt worlds away from the oppressive grandeur of Seacrest Island. But was Elara truly safe? Victoria Thorne's tendrils were long, her influence insidious. The first order of business, after Elara had recounted every chilling detail of her forced stay and Victoria's blatant coercion, was a call to Ananya Sharma. The usually calm, measured tone of the high-powered divorce attorney sharpened with an audible anger that actually made Elara feel a sliver less alone. "This is an outrageous violation of your personal rights, Elara," Ananya stated, her voice crackling with indignation over the phone. "Holding you against your will? Attempting to coerce you into signing legal documents under duress? This is beyond the pale, even for the Thornes. We need to file for an emergency restraining order immediately. If Victoria Thorne or any of her lackeys attempt to approach you or contact you again, there will be serious legal repercussions." Exhausted, emotionally drained, but with a renewed sense of purpose, Elara agreed. The legal machinery, cold and impersonal as it was, felt like her only shield now. She hung up and sank onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, the tension slowly, painstakingly easing from her shoulders. Chloe, ever the steadfast friend, placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You're brave, Elara," she said softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Not many people would have the guts to stand up to the Thorne dynasty like that, especially not Victoria." Elara managed a small, weary smile. "I don't feel brave, Chloe," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel terrified, and so incredibly alone. But I won't let them bully me. I can't. Not anymore. Not with this tiny, precious life depending on her." Chloe squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Elara. You have me. You have this baby, and we're going to fight this together." The next morning, as if on cue, the Thorne machine kicked into high gear. Word, it seemed, had spread like wildfire through the rarefied air of New York society that Elara Vance, or rather Elara Thorne, as the tabloids still delightedly referred to her, had fled the family compound. Social media buzzed with unconfirmed rumors, salacious whispers, and even a few grainy paparazzi shots that had somehow surfaced, showing Elara looking pale and distraught on the Seacrest Island ferry dock. And then came the official Thorne PR offensive. Victoria Thorne, clearly unaccustomed to losing control and even less accustomed to being defied, released a terse, carefully worded statement to the press. It claimed with breathtaking audacity that Elara was simply undergoing medical rest due to pregnancy complications, and that the Thorne family valued her health and privacy above all. The hypocrisy was astounding. The blatant lie. Incensed, Elara, with Ananya Sharma orchestrating the counterattack, composed her own statement. It was short, direct, and refuted Victoria's claims point-blank, stating unequivocally that she was safely in Manhattan and preparing to take legal action against her husband and his family. The tabloids naturally latched onto the drama with gleeful abandon. Headlines screamed from newsstands, "Thorne heir in marital meltdown." "Pregnant wife flees billionaire dynasty's island fortress." "The Thorne War, a billion-dollar divorce looms." It was a media circus, a public spectacle that made Elara's skin crawl. But what choice did she have? Victoria had fired the first shot. This was war. Amidst the public frenzy, the escalating legal threats, and the constant gnawing anxiety, Julian reached out. It was the first time she'd heard from him since her dramatic escape from Seacrest Island. She was in Chloe's car, a battered but beloved Toyota that was the antithesis of Thorne luxury, heading to an appointment with her new OB-GYN, Dr. Evelyn Reed, when her temporary burner phone, another of Chloe's resourceful provisions, buzzed. An unknown number. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Should she even answer? What if it was Victoria, somehow bypassing Ananya's legal barricades? She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Hello?" A pause. Then his voice, Julian, strained, tentative. "Elara, it's me." She forced a calm she was far from feeling into her own voice. "What do you want, Julian?" He sounded different. Not the cold, dismissive Julian of recent weeks, nor the charming, confident man she had first fallen for. This Julian sounded lost. I want to talk, Elara," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Face to face, without lawyers, just us." She hesitated, her mind reeled. The anguish she had felt on Seacrest Island, the cold fury of his mother, his own spinelessness, it was all still so raw. But then she remembered those fleeting flickers of regret, of sorrow she had glimpsed in his eyes. Was it possible? Could there be more to his story than she knew? More than just a callous betrayal? "Fine, Julian," she found herself saying, the words surprising even herself. "We can meet, somewhere public, very public." They arranged to meet at a discreet, unassuming cafe in Midtown, a place so ordinary it was almost invisible. Elara insisted on having Chloe wait nearby. A silent guardian angel in a city of sharks, just in case. When she arrived, Julian was already seated at a small table in the back, looking tired and utterly out of place. The bustling noise of the lunchtime crowd, the clatter of cutlery, the murmur of 100 indifferent conversations, cocooned them in a strange, almost surreal anonymity. "You look well," he said softly, his eyes, those dark, familiar Thorne eyes, flicking to her belly before quickly looking away. How is the baby?" "Healthy, as far as I can tell," Elara replied, her voice carefully neutral, bracing herself for whatever came next. "What do you need to say, Julian? Why this sudden desire to talk after weeks of silence?" He looked around furtively, as if fearing hidden microphones or prying eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mother, Victoria, she's furious, Elara. Beyond furious. She thinks you're going to drag the family name, the Thorne Industries brand, through the mud. She's pressuring me, Elara, pressuring me to take legal action first, to accuse you of defamation, mental instability, anything to undermine you, to discredit you before you can discredit us." His stomach clenched. Victoria Thorne's cruelty, it seemed, knew no bounds. That was despicable, even for her. He nodded, swallowing hard, his gaze fixed on the chipped Formica tabletop. "I told her I wouldn't," he continued, his voice barely audible above the cafe's din. "I can't, Elara. You're my wife." He corrected himself, a flicker of pain in his eyes. "Or you were." "Not for much longer, Julian," she cut in, her own voice trembling despite her best efforts. "I've decided. I'm moving forward with the divorce." He winced but nodded slowly. I understand." He paused, then looked up at her, a desperate plea in his eyes. I want to make sure our child is provided for, Elara, properly provided for. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of their life. If that's even possible now." Elara felt tears brim, her carefully constructed defenses faltering. This was the Julian she remembered, wasn't it? The vulnerable, uncertain man beneath the billionaire's armor? "That depends on you, Julian," she said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. "It depends on whether you'll finally stop lying, stop hiding behind your mother, stop letting her dictate your life, our child's life. It depends on whether you'll actually show up, for once." He reached across the small table then, tentatively placing his hand over hers. His touch, once so familiar, so comforting, now sent a jolt of conflicting emotions through her. "I know I failed you, Elara," he whispered, his thumbs stroking the back of her hand. "God, I know. But I'm trying, Elara. I'm trying to break free from her control, from all of it. I never wanted it to come to this. You have to believe me." She withdrew her hand slowly. "Words won't fix this, Julian," she said, her voice regaining some of its earlier steel. "Actions might. If you truly want to be involved, if you truly want to break free, then cooperate with the divorce. Don't let your family's attorneys, don't let Victoria tear me apart in court. Prove to me that you're not just her puppet." Julian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'll do what I can, Elara," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear." For a long moment they shared a fragile, uncertain silence, the immense gravity of their shattered marriage, the wreckage of their shared past, pressing down on them. Then, Elara stood, a sudden surge of resilience, of clarity, flooding through her. "I need to go," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I have a doctor's appointment." He nodded, his gaze dropping back to the table, a picture of dejection. As Elara walked away, weaving through the lunchtime crowd, she felt a complex, bewildering mixture of relief and sorrow. The man she had once loved, the man she had married with such high hopes, was still in there, somewhere, buried beneath layers of Thorne ambition and Victoria's suffocating control. But he was shackled by a legacy, a dynasty. He seemed utterly powerless to escape. She could only pray that, for the sake of their child, for the sake of his own soul, he would find the courage to finally, truly stand up to his mother. But was that even possible? Could anyone truly escape the shadow of Victoria Thorne? The divorce filing proceeded, a cold, formal declaration of war. Ananya Sharma's firm finalized the documents, citing irreconcilable differences, detailing the emotional neglect, the blatant infidelity with Serafina Dubois, and just hinting, at the potential for financial misconduct within the hallowed halls of Thorne Industries. On a cool, crisp Tuesday morning, a courier delivered the papers to the gleaming steel and glass headquarters of the Thorne conglomerate in downtown Manhattan, ensuring that not just Julian, but the entire board, his mother included, would be made aware of Elara's intentions. The tabloids, predictably, had a field day. Pregnant Thorne wife officially files for divorce. Billion-dollar battle looms for troubled Thorne dynasty. Frenzied reporters like sharks scenting blood in the water camped outside the Oakhaven mansion, the Thorne Industries offices, even Ananya Sharma's law firm. Elara, however, remained cloistered in her small, anonymous hotel room, the stress a constant, gnawing companion, exacerbated by the occasional paparazzi ambush when she dared to venture out. Chloe was a rock, running interference, shielding her as best she could. Ananya, too, was a pillar of strength, her calm reassurances a balm to Elara's frayed nerves. Amid the escalating media circus and the mounting legal pressures, Elara received an unexpected and deeply unsettling call. It was Dr. Evelyn Reed, her new OB-GYN. She wanted to see Elara. Immediately, a cold knot of fear tightened in Elara's stomach. Something was wrong. She just knew it. Concerned, heart-pounding, Elara rushed to the appointment, Chloe as always by her side. Dr. Reed, a kind, no-nonsense woman with gentle eyes, didn't mince words. Elara's blood pressure was dangerously elevated, a risky, potentially life-threatening condition during pregnancy. Preeclampsia, they called it. You need to limit your stress, Elara, Dr. Reed advised gently, her gaze compassionate but firm, noting the almost visible tension that seemed to radiate from every fiber of Elara's being. I know that's easier said than done given your circumstances, but you need to try. Keep hydrated. Rest. You're putting both yourself and the baby at significant risk. After the appointment, the carefully constructed dam of Elara's composure finally shattered. She broke down in Chloe's car, the sobs racking her body, raw and uncontrollable. How, Chloe? She gasped between sobs, clutching her friend's hand like a drowning woman. How can I possibly reduce stress when Julian's family, when Victoria, might throw everything they have at me? When they're trying to destroy me? Chloe handed her a fistful of tissues, her voice gentle, soothing. You're doing the right thing, Elara, she said softly. You're fighting for yourself, for your baby. Just take it one day at a time. One breath at a time. The media frenzy will die down, eventually. And legally, Ananya's team can handle the brunt of it. You just need to focus on staying healthy, for him. Or her. She gave Elara's hand a reassuring squeeze. Elara nodded, wiping her tears, a new, fiercer determination hardening her gaze. She would not let the Thornes break her. She would not let their toxicity harm her child. For the sake of this precious, innocent life growing inside her, she would find the strength. She had to. She would stand firm. Days bled into weeks, each one a fresh battle in the escalating legal war. Julian's attorneys, no doubt under Victoria's explicit instructions, attempted to refute the claims of infidelity, spinning increasingly outlandish narratives that Serafina Dubois was merely a hired designer for the Manhattan penthouse, a valued consultant to Thorne Industries. It was laughable, if it wasn't so infuriatingly insulting. Victoria Thorne herself, however, remained largely silent in public, a calculating queen, focusing her formidable efforts on manipulating board decisions, trying to corner Julian, to pressure him into forcing a quick, quiet, and Thorne-favorable resolution. But Elara, guided by Ananya's shrewd counsel, held her ground. She attended multiple court conferences, each one a draining, emotionally fraught ordeal. Leaning heavily on Ananya's expertise, her unwavering support, Elara faced down the battery of high-priced Thorne lawyers, their faces grim, their tactics often bordering on an aggressive intimidation, clearly designed to break her will. During one particularly tense negotiation, Julian himself appeared in person, flanked by his legal eagles, looking pale and stressed. Elara braced herself for another cold, dismissive showdown, another display of his subservience to his mother's will. But he surprised her. During a brief recess, he managed to take her aside, his voice low, urgent. I've been trying to liquidate some of my personal assets, Elara, he whispered, his eyes darting nervously around the crowded hallway. Assets Mother doesn't directly control. I'm going to put that money into a separate, untouchable account. For you. For the baby. It's not hush money, Elara. Please believe me. It's support, my way of trying to apologize for everything. Elara studied him, searching his face for any sign of deception, of the old Thorne manipulation. But all she saw was a desperate sincerity, a profound weariness, and yes, a deep, aching regret. I appreciate that, Julian, she said quietly, her voice softer than she intended. But it won't change the fact that I need this divorce, that we need this divorce. We can't keep living in these shadows, these lies. He nodded, exhaling a shaky breath. I know, he whispered, his gaze flicking to her belly, a look of such profound sorrow in his eyes that it made her own heart ache. I know. He trailed off, then met her eyes again. Please just keep me updated. On the baby. Her throat tightened. For a fleeting, insane moment, she recalled the man she used to laugh with, the man who had once seemed so genuine, so full of life and love. Now they stood on opposite sides of a vast, yawning chasm, a chasm of betrayal and broken trust that seemed impossible to bridge. She fought a sudden, unexpected urge to hug him, to share in the excitement, the fear, the wonder of becoming parents. But the wounds were too fresh, the betrayals too deep. She simply nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible movement, and turned away. As the legal proceedings continued, the battle lines were drawn ever more firmly. Victoria Thorne, true to form, began employing more underhanded, more vicious tactics. Rumors, carefully planted in the gossip columns, began to surface, questioning Elara's mental fitness, her stability as a mother-to-be. There were even dark whispers of a potential custody fight, a threat designed to terrify Elara into submission. Enraged, Ananya Sharma countered immediately, presenting evidence of the emotional abuse, the neglect, the controlling, manipulative behavior Elara had endured at the hands of the Thorne family. It was getting ugly. So ugly. It felt like there was no resolution in sight, no escape from this relentless, soul-crushing war. Was this what her life had become? A series of legal battles and public humiliations? One night, as Elara lay awake in her sterile hotel room, the city lights a distant, indifferent glitter outside her window, the burner phone beside her bed buzzed. An unknown number again. Her heart leaped into her throat. She hesitated, then answered, her voice a shaky whisper. Hello? The voice on the other end was urgent, hushed, and instantly recognizable. Jax Riley. Chloe's unconventional PI. Elara, it's Jax. Listen carefully. I've uncovered something. Something big. Something that changes everything. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. Everything? What could possibly change everything now? What is it, Jax? She urged, her voice trembling. Tell me. Jax Riley didn't waste words. He explained that while digging deep into the labyrinthine financials of Thorne Industries, a task that had become his personal obsession, he'd stumbled upon evidence. Evidence that the Thorne family, specifically Victoria Thorne, might be involved in something far more sinister than just marital infidelity and emotional abuse. Something criminal. He was talking about massive, illegal offshore tax evasion, a sophisticated scheme orchestrated by Victoria for years, funneling vast portions of the Thorne conglomerate's profits into a shadowy network of secret, untraceable accounts. And the bombshell? Julian, her husband, had apparently discovered this illicit activity years ago, shortly after their marriage, and he'd been secretly, desperately, trying to put a stop to it, to untangle himself and his own legitimate assets from his mother's criminal enterprise. This, Jax explained, was the real reason for Julian's secrecy, his erratic behavior, those sudden, unexplained business trips. He'd been trying to build a case against his own mother, or at the very least to shield himself, and in a twisted, misguided way, perhaps even Elara, from the inevitable blowback. The affair with Serafina Dubois? While undeniably real and unforgivably hurtful, Jack suspected it might have been, at least in part, a desperate, ill-conceived cover for Julian's clandestine movements, his secret meetings, his attempts to gather evidence against a woman as powerful and ruthless as Victoria Thorne. He was a man trapped, not just by his family's expectations, but by their crimes. Stunned, Elara sank onto the edge of the bed, the phone slipping from her numb fingers. It couldn't be true. Could it? Julian, A victim? A man fighting a secret war against his own mother? It was almost too much to comprehend. All those weeks of his coldness, his neglect, had he been dealing with this monumental, terrifying secret? Jax's voice, tinny and distant from the fallen phone, continued. He did have an affair, Elara, from what we can tell. That part seems undeniable. But the deeper secrecy, the real fear in his eyes, I think it was always tied to the family's potential crimes. He might have been trying to shield you, Elara, or maybe he was just trying to orchestrate his own defense plan before the whole damn thing came crashing down. If the federal authorities catch wind of this, Elara, it's massive. Career-ending. Prison time, massive. By the time Elara finally, shakily hung up the phone, her mind was reeling. Julian. Her husband. The man she had loved, then hated. Then, what? What did she feel now? Could he truly be this complicated? Capable of such profound betrayal on a personal level, yet simultaneously trying to protect her, to fight a righteous battle against his own monstrous mother? The confusion, the conflicting emotions weighed heavily on her, a suffocating blanket of uncertainty. She thought back to all the cryptic phone calls, his rushed, unexplained disappearances, the haunted look she'd sometimes glimpse in his eyes before he shuttered himself away. Perhaps they weren't all about Serafina Dubois. Perhaps they were about extricating himself, and by extension her and their child, from the dark, dangerous, criminal machinations of Victoria Thorne and the crumbling Thorne Industries empire. The serpent, indeed, was devouring its own tail. And Julian, it seemed, was caught in its deadly coils. The question was, could she, Elara, now be the one to finally break him free? Or would they all be consumed by the venom of the Thorne dynasty? Her hand went to the locket, the serpent symbol feeling like a brand against her skin. This changed everything. Absolutely everything. And the path forward, once a bitter, straightforward battle for divorce, now twisted into something far more complex, far more dangerous, and, unbelievably, perhaps even holding a sliver, a tiny, terrifying sliver, of hope. Ngoài ra, có một vài tiện ích cần phải bật chế độ hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini thì mới chạy được. Bạn có thể bật chế độ này tại hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini. The new information from Jax Riley, this bombshell about Victoria Thorne's alleged illegal offshore tax evasion and Julian's desperate, secret attempts to fight it, was a game changer. A terrifying, confusing, mind-bending game changer. Elara, her head still reeling, her heart a confused mess of anger, pity, and a strange, unwelcome flicker of understanding, immediately called Ananya Sharma. They needed a new strategy, fast. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was potentially a high-stakes corporate espionage drama with federal implications. Could they even use this information? Accusing a woman as powerful and ruthless as Victoria Thorne of massive financial crimes wasn't just risky, it was potentially life-threatening. Talk about a federal investigation. This was way above Elara's pay grade. Ananya, ever the pragmatist, saw the danger, but also the leverage. If Julian was indeed seeking to distance himself from his mother's criminal activities, if he was genuinely afraid of being implicated, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could use this to negotiate a swift, clean divorce settlement, one that would ensure Elara and her child were completely free, financially and legally, from the toxic, potentially criminal, dealings of the Thorne conglomerate. But it meant treading carefully, very, very carefully. One wrong move, one misplaced accusation, and Victoria Thorne could, and undoubtedly would, unleash the full, terrifying force of her legal and financial arsenal. They were walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. A confidential meeting was arranged. Ananya Sharma's impeccably appointed law office, a fortress of calm and legal firepower high above the bustling streets of Manhattan. Julian arrived alone, looking even more stressed and haggard than he had at the cafe. The expensive suit hung a little looser on his frame. The dark circles under his eyes were more pronounced. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, or at least the weight of a crumbling, corrupt empire, on his shoulders. Ananya, all cool professionalism, opened the discussion, her voice calm but laced with an underlying steel. Julian, she began, her gaze unwavering, we have reason to believe, based on credible evidence, that there are significant financial irregularities within Thorne Industries. Specifically, illegal offshore accounts, substantial undeclared assets, and a pattern of creative accounting that strongly suggests systemic tax evasion. She let that hang in the air for a moment, the silence in the room so thick you could cut it with a knife. Elara, Ananya continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, could, if she chose, bring this information to the attention of the relevant federal authorities, an act which would undoubtedly trigger a full-scale investigation into Thorne Industries and, by extension, your family. Julian's face, already pale, seemed to drain of all remaining color. He visibly flinched, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a hoarse, barely audible whisper. How did you? He shook his head, a gesture of weary resignation. Never mind, it doesn't matter how. He looked up then, his eyes meeting Elara's, and for the first time she saw not just fear, but a profound, soul-deep exhaustion, and something else. Relief? Yes, he admitted, the word a mere breath. Yes, it's true. My mother, Victoria, she's been running that operation for years, decades, probably. He raked a hand through his already disheveled hair. I didn't discover the full extent of it until after we were married. She orchestrated everything so carefully, buried it so deep, it took me a long time to gather even a fraction of the proof. Elara's heart ached with a confusing mix of emotions. Betrayal still simmered, a dull, persistent ache. But now, layered on top of it, was this unexpected, unwelcome surge of empathy. Why, Julian? She asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe that you were just a heartless, cheating bastard? She left unsaid. He rubbed his temples, his eyes squeezed shut as if against a blinding pain. I was scared, Elara, he confessed, his voice raw with a vulnerability she hadn't witnessed since their earliest days together. Terrified. Scared that if you knew, you'd be in danger. Scared that Victoria would use you against me. Scared that you'd hate me for being a part of it, even unwillingly. He opened his eyes, his gaze pleading. And I was trying to stop it, Elara, from the inside, but it was like trying to fight a hydra. Every time I thought I had a handle on one part of it, 2 more schemes would spring up. He sighed, a sound of utter defeat. I got tangled up in the deception, in the lies. I needed an escape, a release. And that's when Serafina happened. He looked directly at Elara, his eyes filled with a self-loathing that was almost painful to watch. It was stupid, Elara. Reckless, a cowardly, unforgivable mistake, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the distant, muted sounds of the city far below. Elara looked at Julian, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. She saw not just the betrayer, the neglectful husband, but a man trapped, a man fighting a battle he was clearly losing, a man who had made terrible, hurtful choices under unimaginable pressure. It didn't excuse his actions, not by a long shot. But it explained them. At least some of them. At last, Elara spoke, her voice tremulous but firm. Julian, she began, choosing her words carefully, Ananya's earlier counsel echoing in her mind. I can't undo your betrayal. The affair, the lies, they hurt me more deeply than you can possibly imagine. Julian flinched, but she pressed on. But for the sake of our child, Julian, for the sake of a future free from this toxicity, I am willing to offer you a path, a way out, for both of us. He looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. What do you mean? I want a divorce, Julian, Elara stated, her voice gaining strength. A divorce that frees us both from your mother's manipulations, from her crimes, from this entire web of deceit, and in return for your full, honest cooperation. Cooperation with me, with Ananya, and yes, if it comes to that, with the authorities. We can structure this divorce in a way that ensures our child's safety, their financial security, and your continued, honest involvement in their life. She paused, letting her words sink in. Are you willing to do that, Julian? Are you willing to finally come clean? To testify against your mother if necessary? To dismantle this criminal enterprise she's built? He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped, the silence stretching for what felt like an eternity. Elara held her breath. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment that would define not just their future, but the future of the entire Thorne dynasty. Then, slowly, painstakingly, he nodded. Tears welled in his eyes, tracing shimmering paths down his haggard cheeks. Yes, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, Elara, I'll do it. I'll sign whatever I need to sign. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes to ensure that you and our child are safe, that you're free from from all of this. He looked up at her then, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate plea. Just promise me, Elara. Promise me I won't lose any chance to be part of my child's life. That's all I ask. Tears pricked at Elara's own eyes. She reached for a tissue, her hand trembling, glancing at Ananya, who offered a small, almost imperceptible supportive nod. You'll have that chance, Julian, Elara said, her voice shaking slightly. But you need to be honest. From now on, no more lies, no more secrets. He nodded, a wave of relief, so profound it was almost palpable, washing over his features, mingled with an undeniable sorrow. I will, Elara, he promised. I swear. No more lies. Within days, the final divorce papers were drawn, a testament to Ananya Sharma's legal prowess and Julian's newfound, albeit reluctant, cooperation. The settlement was substantial, ensuring Elara's financial independence and, more importantly, the future security of their child. Joint custody arrangements were meticulously outlined, allowing Julian visitation rights, provided he adhered to a strict code of conduct and continued his cooperation with the ongoing, albeit still covert, investigations into Thorne Industries. And crucially, the most important clause, the one Ananya had fought tooth and nail for. A comprehensive, ironclad release that shielded Elara and her child from any and all liability tied to the Thorne conglomerate's increasingly dubious and potentially illegal offshore accounts and financial dealings. They were, for all intents and purposes, firewalled from the impending implosion. Victoria Thorne, predictably, was livid. Cornered. Trapped by her own son's testimony, by the damning evidence Elara and Ananya now possessed. If she tried to retaliate to fight the settlement, Julian could, and Ananya made it abundantly clear he would. Reveal her decades of financial scheming to the world, to the federal authorities. The scandal would not just tarnish the Thorne name, it would obliterate it. It would destroy the company, unravel the dynasty she had spent her life ruthlessly building. If she cut Julian out of the family trust, disinherited him, she risked losing what little control she had left over the board, over the narrative. In the end, backed into a corner of her own making, the iron-willed matriarch had no choice but to sign. Grudgingly. Her contempt for Elara, for the woman who had dared to defy her, to dismantle her empire, was palpable in the icy glares, the biting, venomous remarks she conveyed through her increasingly desperate lawyers in private, scathing emails. But sign she did. The serpent, it seemed, was finally, truly, beginning to devour itself. On a surprisingly sunny afternoon in Manhattan, a stark contrast to the gloom that had shrouded Elara's life for so long, she and Julian met at the courthouse to finalize the divorce. Elara wore a simple, elegant beige dress, her pregnant belly now quite pronounced, a visible symbol of the new life, the new future she was fighting for. Julian, in a subdued navy suit, approached her with a rueful, almost apologetic smile. He looked lighter, somehow, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Reporters, like a pack of hungry wolves, buzzed outside, their cameras clicking relentlessly, a final, intrusive soundtrack to the end of a chapter. Inside the judge's chambers, the atmosphere was somber, formal. When the judge, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, asked if both parties were certain they wished to proceed, they each answered, their voices clear, resolute, yes. The gavel struck the polished wood with a sharp, definitive crack. And just like that, the marriage of Elara Vance and Julian Thorne was legally, irrevocably, over. Julian lingered for a moment after the judge had left, seeming to want to say more, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of sorrow, regret, and something else? Gratitude? Elara met his gaze, her own anger, her own grief, now interwoven with a faint, surprising thread of sympathy, of understanding. She offered him a small, gentle parting look, a silent acknowledgement of the hell they had both endured, the hell they were both, hopefully, now escaping. Then, with a quiet dignity that spoke volumes, she turned and walked away, the hush of finality, of a hard-won peace, settling over her heart. She was free, truly free. Or was she? As she stepped out of the courthouse, blinking in the sudden brightness of the afternoon sun, a liveried staff member from Thorne Industries, someone she didn't recognize, an older man with kind, sad eyes, discreetly approached her. He pressed a small, sealed envelope into her hand. "Mr. Julian asked me to give this to you, Mrs. Thorne. I mean, Miss Vance," the man murmured, his voice low, respectful. He said you would understand." And then just as quickly he was gone, melting back into the chaotic throng of reporters and onlookers. Later that evening, alone in the quiet sanctuary of her temporary hotel room, Elara opened the envelope. Inside, nestled on a bed of crisp, expensive-looking paper, was a single, antique-looking key and a short, handwritten note. "This unlocks a truth about me, Elara," the note read, the handwriting unmistakably Julian's. "And perhaps, if you can find it in your heart, a path to my redemption. I couldn't give it to you myself, not yet. Be well, Julian." Elara stared at the key, her heart pounding. It was small, ornate, made of what looked like tarnished silver, and etched into its head, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a tiny, intricately carved symbol. A serpent. A serpent devouring its own tail. The same serpent that was on the locket. What did it mean? What truth was Julian talking about? And did she even want to know? The Thorne saga, she had thought, was finally over. But this key felt like another beginning, another secret, another dangerous, seductive door into the dark, labyrinthine heart of the Thorne dynasty. And the question, a chilling whisper in the silence of the room, was whether she had the courage or the foolhardiness to turn it. The city lights, usually a dazzling, indifferent glitter, seemed softer tonight, more forgiving, as Elara Vance gazed out the window of her new apartment. It wasn't the Oakhaven mansion, not by a long shot. Modest by Thorne standards, almost laughably so. But it was hers. Safe. A sanctuary earned through a hell she wouldn't wish on her worst enemy. Well, maybe on Victoria Thorne. A small, genuine smile touched Elara's lips at the thought. 2 months. 2 months since the gavel fell, severing her ties to Julian, to the Thorne dynasty, to the gilded cage that had almost suffocated her. 2 months of rebuilding, of rediscovering the woman she was, before the whirlwind of Julian Thorne had swept her off her feet and into a life of glittering illusion. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, bless their steadfast, uncomplicated hearts, had been overjoyed, rushing to Manhattan from Millfield, their support a warm, comforting blanket around her. Chloe Maxwell, her rock, her warrior sister, visited often, her battered Toyota a familiar, welcome sight, always laden with groceries, gossip, and her signature brand of irreverent, life-affirming banter. And the financial settlement, meticulously negotiated by the formidable Ananya Sharma, was more than substantial. It was freedom, stability, enough to ensure a secure, comfortable future for her and her child, a future untainted by Thorne money, unburdened by Thorne expectations. A new beginning. Julian, to his credit, was keeping his end of the bargain. He called weekly, his voice still tinged with that strange mixture of sorrow and a hesitant hope, to check on the baby, carefully maintaining a respectful, almost deferential distance. He was, Ananya had informed her, cooperating quietly but fully with the authorities investigating Victoria's labyrinthine financial activities. The Thorne dynasty, that once unshakable empire, was already showing signs of internal collapse. The carefully constructed facade crumbling as board members, spooked by the looming scandal and the very real threat of a federal investigation, began to distance themselves from the toxic Thorne matriarch. The wheels of justice, Elara was learning, turned slowly, but they did, indeed, turn. The mighty Victoria Thorne, it seemed, was finally facing a reckoning. Who would have thought it possible? Could the serpent finally be devouring its own tail? In her quieter moments, often late at night when the city's cacophony softened to a distant hum, Elara would reflect on the whirlwind she had endured. Love, betrayal, power, vulnerability, they had all collided in a cataclysm that had nearly broken her. Nearly, but not quite. She often found herself tracing the outline of the antique silver locket Julian had given her, the one with the strange serpent symbol, and the equally mysterious, identical key the Thorne Industries staffer had pressed into her hand that chaotic day at the courthouse. "This unlocks your husband's truth, and perhaps his redemption," the note had read. What truth? What redemption? And did she even want to know? The Thorne saga, as far as she was concerned, was over, wasn't it? Curiosity, however, is a tenacious beast. One quiet afternoon, the city drowsing under a hazy summer sun, Elara finally gave in. Her fingers, surprisingly steady, retrieved the locket and the key from the small velvet-lined box where she kept her few remaining treasures. With a deep breath, she inserted the tiny, ornate key into an almost invisible slot on the side of the locket. A soft click, and a hidden compartment, one she'd never known existed, sprang open. Inside, nestled against the tarnished silver, was a minuscule, tightly folded piece of parchment. And something else, something that glinted in the afternoon light. With trembling fingers, Elara unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was faded, spidery, but undeniably elegant. It was a fragment of a letter, addressed to "My dearest Julian," not from Julian but to him, from his father. A father she knew had died years ago, under circumstances Julian rarely spoke of. "Know that true strength, my son," Elara read, her heart pounding, "is not in empire, not in the accumulation of wealth or power, but in integrity. In truth. Your mother's path, it is one of shadows, of compromises that will eventually devour the soul. Protect the light within you, Julian. Protect it fiercely." Protect the light. Had Julian even remembered these words? Had he ever truly understood them? Beneath the parchment, Elara found the source of that tiny glint, a nearly microscopic data chip. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a locket, a sentimental keepsake. This was something else entirely. A message, a warning, a desperate, last-ditch effort from a dead father to save his son? Or perhaps something Julian himself had prepared. A failsafe he never got the chance to use? Her mind raced. What secrets did this tiny chip hold? Secrets that a man like Julian Thorne, a man enmeshed in the dark heart of the Thorne conglomerate, felt compelled to hide in such an elaborate, almost anachronistic way. She knew with a chilling certainty that she couldn't ignore this. This wasn't just about Julian's past anymore. It was about her child's future, a future she was determined to keep free from the lingering, poisonous shadows of the Thorne dynasty. She contacted Jax Riley, Chloe's unconventional but undeniably brilliant private investigator. If anyone could access the information on that chip, safely and discreetly, it was Jax. He met her at a nondescript electronics repair shop in a grimy corner of Queens, a far cry from Ananya Sharma's polished midtown office. Jax, with his perpetually skeptical eyes and a cynical humor that Elara was beginning to appreciate, handled the tiny chip with surprising delicacy. Well, Miss Vance," he drawled, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "What secrets have we here? Pandora's locket, is it?" The secrets, when Jax finally painstakingly retrieved them, were indeed a Pandora's box of Thorne family horrors. The chip contained irrefutable primary evidence of Victoria Thorne's earliest illegal activities, a meticulously documented trail of blackmail, extortion, and ruthless manipulation that detailed exactly how she had seized control of Thorne Industries after her husband's, Julian's father's, sudden and now deeply suspicious accidental death years ago. It implicated key allies, powerful men and women who had long benefited from Victoria's reign of terror. It was a bombshell, enough to not just accelerate the ongoing federal investigation, but to ensure Victoria Thorne's complete and utter downfall. This wasn't just tax evasion. This was something monstrous. Elara, through Ananya, discreetly informed Julian of the chip's existence, of its devastating contents, without revealing, yet, that she was the one who possessed it. Julian's reaction, Ananya later reported, was one of stunned, almost catatonic silence, followed by a torrent of grief and a dawning, horrified understanding. His father, he confessed, had always suspected Victoria, had always feared her insatiable ambition, her utter lack of a moral compass. He'd apparently been gathering evidence against her, trying to find a way to stop her before she destroyed everything, before she destroyed him. But he'd died before he could act decisively, leaving Julian with only fragments of suspicion, a deep-seated unease, and the antique silver locket, a gift from his father whose true purpose, whose hidden compartment he had never fully understood, but had cherished as his most precious, albeit unexamined, possession. He had given it to Elara, he admitted tearfully to Ananya, because it was the only thing of true value, the only piece of his father's legacy he felt he had left to give. He just hadn't known how valuable it truly was. Elara now held the final key. The key to dismantling Victoria Thorne's empire of lies completely. The key to perhaps finally clearing Julian's father's name from any association with Victoria's decades of corruption. The key, maybe, just maybe, to Julian's own tortured redemption. She felt a sense of profound, almost weary closure, not just for herself, but for Julian's trapped legacy, for the innocent child growing within her, a child who deserved a future untainted by the sins of the grandmother. Her decision, when it came, was swift, resolute. She would give the data chip to the authorities, anonymously, through Jax Riley. It would be her final act in the Thorne saga. Her final definitive severing of ties. The serpent would finally finish devouring itself, and she, Elara Vance, and her child would be free. As she felt another swift, reassuring kick from within, a small, genuine smile, the first truly carefree smile in what felt like an eternity, touched her lips. The shadows were receding. A new dawn was, indeed, breaking. Ngoài ra, có một vài tiện ích cần phải bật chế độ hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini thì mới chạy được. Bạn có thể bật chế độ này tại hoạt động trên ứng dụng Gemini. The key, cold and strangely heavy in her palm, felt like the final piece of a puzzle Elara hadn't even known she was assembling. The serpent locket, Julian's cryptic note. It all led here. To this. What new horrors, what fresh betrayals, would this tiny piece of tarnished silver unlock? Part of her, the part that was so bone-weary of the Thorne drama, wanted to throw it into the depths of the Hudson River and walk away. Forget Julian. Forget the Thornes. Forget everything but the new life stirring within her. But another part, the part that had been forged in the fires of deceit and a thirst for truth, knew she couldn't. Not yet. The city outside her modest Manhattan apartment hummed with its usual relentless energy, a stark contrast to the quiet contemplation within. 2 months. 2 months since the divorce. 2 months of building a new life, brick by fragile brick. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, had been a godsend, their uncomplicated love a balm to her bruised soul. Chloe Maxwell, her fiercely loyal friend, was a constant presence, her sharp wit and unwavering support a reminder that she wasn't alone in this. The financial settlement, a hard-won victory thanks to Ananya Sharma's brilliance, provided a cushion of security, a promise of stability for her and her child, a future blessedly free from the gilded chains of the Thorne conglomerate. And Julian? He was, surprisingly, keeping his word. He called weekly, his inquiries about the baby hesitant, almost shy. He was cooperating with the authorities. Ananya had confirmed, providing information, testimony, anything that would help unravel the tangled web of Victoria Thorne's decades of financial machinations. The Thorne dynasty, once an unassailable fortress of wealth and power, was beginning to crumble, its foundations shaken by the looming scandal, its carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of its own corruption. Board members were panicking, defecting, desperately trying to distance themselves from the toxic matriarch and her rapidly imploding empire. Justice, it seemed, was a slow, grinding process, but it was inexorably coming for Victoria Thorne. Would you believe such a powerful figure could fall? It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the illusion of invincibility. But still, the locket, and now the key, lay heavy on Elara's mind, on her heart. That serpent forever devouring its own tail. What did it truly signify? One rainy afternoon, the city a blur of gray outside her window, Elara's curiosity finally irrevocably won. With trembling fingers, she took the locket, the key. The key slid into an almost invisible slot on the locket's side. A soft click, and a tiny, hidden compartment, one she'd never even suspected existed, sprang open. Inside, nestled against the tarnished silver, was a minuscule, tightly folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age, and something else, something that glinted. A tiny, almost microscopic data chip. Her breath hitched. What in God's name was this? Carefully, her heart pounding, Elara unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was faded, elegant, achingly familiar from the few old photographs Julian kept of his deceased father. It was a fragment of a letter, addressed to a young Julian, his father's words a ghostly echo from the past. Know that true strength, my son, is not in empire, not in the accumulation of wealth or power, but in integrity, in truth. Your mother's path, it is one of shadows, of compromises that will eventually devour the soul. Protect the light within you, Julian. Protect it fiercely. A serpent may shed its skin, but its nature remains. She will try to control the narrative, to own your very soul. Remember the locket. Should the shadows grow too deep, the locket. This wasn't just a sentimental gift then. It was a message, a warning, a desperate, last-ditch lifeline from a father trying to protect his son from beyond the grave. Or perhaps something Julian himself had prepared, a contingency, a secret weapon he never had the chance or the courage to deploy. This was more than just a rich man's drama, wasn't it? This was a battle for a soul. Elara knew, with a chilling certainty, that she couldn't ignore this. The data chip, What secrets did it hold? She contacted Jax Riley. If anyone could safely, discreetly access its contents, it was him. The information Jax retrieved from that tiny chip was a revelation. A horror. It was irrefutable, primary evidence of Victoria Thorne's earliest illegal activities, a meticulously documented trail of blackmail, extortion, and ruthless, cold-blooded manipulation. It detailed, in chilling precision, how she had seized control of Thorne Industries decades ago, systematically destroying anyone who stood in her way, including, the evidence strongly suggested, her own husband, Julian's father, whose accidental death had always been shrouded in a veil of convenient ambiguity. This wasn't just about offshore accounts and tax evasion anymore. This was about a legacy built on lies, on betrayal, possibly even on murder. The serpent hadn't just been devouring its own tail. It had been consuming everyone around it, and the fallout from this, it would be monumental. When Ananya Sharma, at Elara's tearful, shaken request, discreetly informed Julian of the chip's existence, of its devastating, damning contents, without revealing yet that Elara was the one who possessed it, his reaction was one of stunned, almost catatonic silence, followed by a torrent of grief, a dawning, horrified understanding. His father, he confessed to Ananya, his voice choked with emotion, had always suspected Victoria, had always feared her insatiable ambition, her terrifying lack of a moral compass. He'd apparently been gathering evidence against her, desperately trying to find a way to stop her before she destroyed everything, before she destroyed him. But he died before he could act decisively, leaving Julian with only fragments of suspicion, a deep-seated unease, and the antique silver locket. A gift from his father, its true purpose, its hidden compartment, a secret Julian had never fully understood, but had cherished as his most precious, albeit unexamined, possession. He had given it to Elara, he admitted, his voice breaking, because it was the only thing of true value, the only piece of his father's untainted legacy he felt he had left to give. He just hadn't known how truly valuable, how utterly devastating it really was. Elara now held the final key. The key to dismantling Victoria Thorne's empire of lies completely and utterly. The key to perhaps, finally, clearing Julian's father's name from any association with Victoria's decades of corruption. The key, maybe, just maybe, to Julian's own tortured, complicated redemption. She felt a sense of profound, almost weary closure, not just for herself, but for Julian's trapped legacy. For the innocent child, their child, growing within her. A child who deserved a future untainted by the poisonous, lingering shadows of the Thorne dynasty. What would you do holding that kind of power, that kind of truth, in your hands? Her decision when it came was swift, resolute. She would give the data chip to the authorities, anonymously, through Jax Riley. It would be her final act in the Thorne saga, her final definitive severing of ties. The serpent would finally, truly, finish devouring itself, its venom neutralized, its power extinguished, and she, Elara Vance, and her child would be free. As she felt another swift, reassuring kick from within, a small, genuine smile, the first truly carefree smile in what felt like an eternity, touched her lips. The shadows were receding. A new dawn was indeed breaking, and the path ahead, though uncertain, was finally, blessedly, her own. Dear friend, sometimes the weight of betrayal feels unbearable, like the world you trusted is crumbling beneath your feet. Elara's journey reminds us of something the Stoics knew deeply, that while we cannot always control what others do to us, we can control how we respond. She chose courage over fear, truth over silence, and love, for herself and her child, over appearances. In the face of power, manipulation, and heartbreak, she stood her ground, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she knew her worth. And maybe that's what resilience really is, doing the hard thing anyway, even with trembling hands and a shattered heart. You are stronger than what tried to break you, always. If Elara's story touched you, please gently tap the like button, share this with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what strength truly looks like.